The wind howled across the frozen world, whipping shards of ice against the walls of the dragon orphanage. The building groaned, old metal plates rattling and cracking under the cold. Smoke from the tiny chimneys was faint, almost invisible in the icy air. Inside, the temperature was only slightly better. Frost had begun to form along the corners of the floor, curling up like tiny, sharp fingers. Small dragon hatchlings huddled together in groups, their scales dull and their wings trembling. Some tried to breathe fire, but only weak sparks flickered from their mouths. Their stomachs were empty, their strength fading with each passing hour. One little dragon, no bigger than a human child, tried to stretch its wings, but they drooped heavily. The thin membrane between its fingers of bone was cracked, like frozen paper. It curled back into the group, shivering. Two caretakers stood nearby, their faces pale under the dim lights of the orphanage. They whispered urgently to each other. "We can't keep this going," one said, her voice trembling. "The heating system is failing again. The generators barely work. The supply shipments from the outer colonies have stopped. Soon, there won't be anything left for them." The other caretaker shook his head. "I know, but if we leave, they won't survive the night. Even a day without heat, and some will die. The council doesn't care. They think dragons are strong. They think this is natural. No one will send help." Outside, the wind carried icy dust and metal echoes from the nearby industrial city. The galaxy outside was busy with trade and war, with starships moving between planets, but no one noticed this frozen corner. Dragons were legendary and feared. The galaxy thought them mighty, fierce, invincible. Who would look at tiny hatchlings huddled in frost, helpless and hungry? Inside, a hatchling let out a small, pitiful cry. It was almost silent, but it echoed through the cold, empty hall. The caretakers flinched, but did not move fast enough to comfort it. The little dragon's eyes, large and bright, glimmered with fear and confusion. Its mouth opened weakly, trying again, but only a faint wisp of smoke escaped. Hunger and cold had sapped its fire. The caretaker leaned closer, whispering softly, "Don't worry, little one. We'll try to get through tonight." But even her words sounded fragile in the drafty hall. The floor beneath them creaked. Ice crunched under scales. A small hatchling, smaller than the rest, crawled toward the faint light of the candle. Its movements were slow, awkward, trembling with cold. A sudden gust rattled the windows. Frosted panes cracked slightly. The orphanage shuddered. The caretakers exchanged worried glances. "If the main power fails tonight, we can't keep the warmth," said one. His breath came out in clouds. "They'll freeze before morning. Some of them won't even survive the night." The hatchlings shifted closer together, instinctively seeking warmth from each other. Their tiny hearts beat fast, their wings weak and unsteady. A larger hatchling tried to breathe fire to warm them, but only sparks flickered and died quickly. Even the oldest hatchling, who had survived many nights like this, huddled quietly, too tired to protest. Outside, the cold never stopped. The world beyond the orphanage was industrial and harsh. Smoke and metal dust filled the air, freezing before it could fall. The galaxy had no eyes here. Starships passed above, but none saw the smoke that rose from the chimneys, nor the small dragons struggling inside. Their fire was weak, their lives delicate, but the galaxy thought dragons were strong. Strong enough to survive without help. Inside, the caretakers worked quickly, checking the heaters and the generator panels. Sparks flew from broken circuits. Wires hung loose. The building groaned under the cold, threatening to collapse. One of the caretakers muttered, "We can't hold this. It's only a matter of time." The hatchlings responded with small, frightened noises. A tiny white hatchling trembled, trying to crawl to the warmer corner, but its wings were too weak. It let out a soft whimper. The caretaker reached out and gently lifted it. "Sure, it's okay. Just a little longer. We'll survive until morning," she whispered. But even her words sounded like a lie, swallowed by the cold and darkness. Time passed slowly. Every small noise, creaking walls, distant metal bangs from the city, made the dragons flinch. One hatchling tried to fly, but could barely lift itself from the icy floor. Its flames sputtered and died before it could even feel heat. Another curled up in the corner, hiding its face in its wings, too weak to even cry. The caretaker looked at the group and sighed, despair heavy on her shoulders. She had been here for many winters. Each year, she had hoped someone would come. Each year, she had failed to save them all. And this year, worse than before, the supplies had stopped entirely. "We may not make it," she said softly, tears freezing on her cheeks. The orphanage grew colder as night fell. Frost spread across the floors and walls, sharp and brittle. The small dragons huddled together, shivering. Some tried to light sparks from their tiny fire glands, but the heat was too weak. Hunger and exhaustion had taken their strength. The largest dragon among them, barely bigger than the caretaker herself, curled protectively around the smaller ones, trying to give warmth it barely had. And in the dark, a strange, faint sound reached the orphanage, an echo of the city beyond, a hum that seemed different from the wind. The hatchlings paused, ears twitching. Even the caretakers noticed it. A small hope stirred, like a faint ember struggling in snow. Something, or someone, was coming. But the cold pressed harder, the walls groaning, the frost spreading. The hatchlings' eyes reflected the dim candlelight, flickering like dying stars. They had no warmth. No strength. No hope, except the tiny spark that something new might arrive. In the corner, the smallest hatchling closed its eyes and let out a weak, smoky sigh. And in that moment, the orphanage felt emptier than ever. Yet somewhere beyond the icy gates, a human engineer was stepping closer, unaware of the fragile lives waiting inside. Aaron Vale stepped into the orphanage, his boots crunching on the icy floor. The air smelled of smoke and frost, cold and sharp. Hatchlings stirred at his arrival, their small eyes wide with fear. He had worked on machines for many worlds, fixing things others could not. But nothing in his experience had prepared him for this. Dragons, especially young ones, were fragile, tiny flames flickering against a harsh galaxy that expected them to be mighty. He knelt beside one of the smallest hatchlings, its scales pale and dull, wings trembling. It tried to breathe fire, but only a tiny wisp rose, fading almost immediately. Aaron reached out his hand slowly. "It's okay," he said softly. The little dragon flinched but did not move away. Aaron felt a pang of sorrow. These creatures were not only weak from hunger, but also from neglect. The galaxy believed they were strong, so no one sent help. The caretakers watched him carefully. One woman, older and sharp-eyed, stepped forward. "Why are you here?" she asked. Her voice was guarded, full of distrust. "Humans come, and they often make things worse. You don't know how to handle dragons. You might harm them." Aaron shook his head. "I don't want to harm them. I only want to help." He looked around at the orphanage, the cracked walls, the frozen floors, the weak flames flickering from tired mouths. "I see the problem. You cannot use standard reactors, can you?" The caretakers exchanged uneasy glances. "No," said the older woman. "We tried. The last engineers used reactors from the colonies. The dragon's fire glands flared uncontrollably. Some burned themselves. Some became weak and sick. That is why no one tries anymore. No one wants to risk it." Aaron frowned. He had seen many kinds of engines and reactors, but nothing like this. Dragons were alive, breathing creatures, not machines. Their fire came from inside them, delicate and dangerous at the same time. Using normal energy sources could hurt them. He had to find a new way. A way that worked with the dragons, not against them. The caretaker crossed her arms. "Even if you want to help, humans cannot understand them. You will fail." Her voice was harsh, but there was worry underneath. She had seen too many failures before. Hatchlings had died because of ignorance and arrogance. She could not let that happen again. Aaron nodded respectfully. "I understand. I need to study the dragons first. I need to see how they breathe, how they produce fire, how their bodies work." He walked slowly toward a group of hatchlings. One of the smallest, almost white with frost on its scales, looked at him with bright, fearful eyes. Aaron knelt, careful not to startle it. The hatchling sniffed and curled closer to its siblings. Aaron observed quietly. He noticed the warmth of their bodies. Weak, yes, but it was there. Tiny pulses of heat rose from their chests. Their fire glands were sensitive. Too much energy would hurt them. He understood now why previous solutions failed. The dragons needed care, not power. The caretakers whispered among themselves, glancing at him. "He may be human," one muttered. "But he notices things we missed. Maybe he can help." Aaron walked through the orphanage, studying the walls and the old heaters. They were cracked and broken. Wires hung loose, sparking sometimes. The hatchlings clustered near the center of the room, trying to share what little warmth they had. The building itself seemed alive with cold, groaning and shivering. Every part of it threatened to fail, and if it did, the dragons would not survive the night. He pulled out a small notebook and sketched the layout of the orphanage. He made notes about heat flow, the weak spots in insulation, and the way the hatchlings clustered together. He scribbled ideas for collecting their warmth without hurting them. He imagined a system that could store their energy, protect them from cold, and let them grow safely. The older caretaker approached him cautiously. "What do you plan to do?" she asked. Her voice was softer now, tinged with hope and fear. Aaron looked up. "I don't know exactly yet. I need to build something new, something different. I cannot use reactors or fuel. It would harm them. I need to work with what is safe, with what they already have. Their bodies, their fire, their little pulses of warmth. If I can capture it, store it, and spread it carefully, maybe it can be enough to survive the winter." The caretaker studied him closely. "You make it sound easy. It is not. The dragons will test you. If they feel danger, they will fight or hide. If the system fails, they will die." Aaron nodded. "I know. But I have to try." He looked at the hatchlings, some curling up in the corners, some staring at him with hope they did not understand. He felt a heavy weight in his chest. Their lives depended on his knowledge, his courage, and his ability to think differently. He spent the next hours observing every detail. He noted which hatchlings generated the most heat, how they huddled together, how their fire glands flickered weakly. He studied the walls, the floors, the broken insulation, imagining a way to trap warmth and spread it without causing pain. He tested ideas silently in his mind, careful not to alarm the dragons. At one point, a hatchling cried out, weak and trembling. Aaron gently placed his hand near it, letting his own warmth brush against its scales. The hatchling flinched but did not pull away. The older caretaker watched quietly, her heart softening. Perhaps this human could be trusted. Perhaps he could see what they had not, that dragons were not machines, not weapons, not tools, they were lives that needed care. The night deepened, and the cold pressed harder against the walls. Aaron made small notes, planning a system that would not harm the dragons, something that could keep them alive until help arrived, or until the galaxy noticed them. He knew it would be dangerous. One wrong move, and everything could fail. But he also knew that giving up was not an option. By the time the first pale light of the icy sun touched the frozen world, Aaron had a rough plan forming. It would not be perfect. It would take work, testing, patience, and courage. But for the first time, the orphanage felt a small flicker of hope. The hatchlings lifted their heads, sensing change in the air. And Aaron Vale, human engineer, understood something the galaxy did not. To save dragons, he could not force power on them. He had to build something new. Something that worked with life, not against it. Something that would give warmth, safety, and hope to the smallest, weakest dragons in the galaxy. Aaron worked quietly in the orphanage's basement, the only place safe enough to tinker with his ideas. The cold outside pressed against the walls like a living thing, but inside, the air was still, heavy with frost and quiet whispers of hatchlings above. He laid out scraps of metal, old ship coils, and insulated panels he had carried with him from the city. His hands moved carefully, connecting wires and plates, imagining how warmth could flow like water through a safe system. The hatchlings above stirred occasionally, their weak sparks of fire flickering in the dim light. Aaron glanced up and smiled faintly. "Not long now," he whispered to himself. He did not fully know if this would work, but he knew it had to. If he failed, the dragons would not survive another night. He started by assembling the heat capture plates. They were thin sheets of alloy that could absorb warmth without burning. He attached them to the walls and floors where the dragons huddled most. Each plate was carefully angled to catch every small pulse of heat from the dragons' bodies. He connected them with old ship coils, which he rewired to carry warmth slowly, safely, without creating sparks. The adaptive insulation was next. Aaron wrapped the walls and floors in it like a second skin. It was soft and flexible but strong enough to hold heat inside. It would expand and contract gently as the dragons moved, never pressing too hard, never hurting them. "Like a blanket," he muttered. "A blanket for their lives." The most delicate part was the storage unit. Aaron built a small container to hold the collected warmth. It was not fuel, not fire, not radiation, just heat, captured and kept stable. The idea was simple, but the execution had to be perfect. If the storage overheated, it could burn the hatchlings. If it was too weak, it would fail to warm them. Every bolt, every plate, every coil had to be exactly right. Once the device was assembled, Aaron tested it quietly. He placed a small sensor near one of the hatchlings and activated the system. A gentle hum filled the room, soft and steady. The plates began to glow faintly, not like fire, but like the warmth of the sun touching snow. The hatchling twitched, sensing the new energy. Its wings fluttered slightly, and a small wisp of fire rose and faded harmlessly. Aaron watched, holding his breath. The warmth traveled through the coils and into the storage unit. The system worked slowly, like a heartbeat. It did not blast heat at the dragons. Instead, it matched the natural rhythm of their bodies. Every pulse of warmth felt safe, steady, comforting. The caretaker peeked into the basement. Her eyes widened when she saw the glowing plates. "Is it working?" she whispered. Aaron nodded. "Yes," slowly. "It's safe. It doesn't burn, it doesn't shock them. It just gathers their warmth and returns it gently." He smiled faintly, though he felt the weight of responsibility pressing down. This is only the beginning. It has to keep working, all night and all day, or it will fail. The warmth began to spread through the orphanage. Floors and walls, once frosted, softened. Hatchlings stirred more boldly, some lifting their heads. The smallest ones pressed against each other, feeling the gentle heat. Their wings twitched as if remembering strength long forgotten. A tiny dragon, white as frost, tried to breathe fire again. This time, a faint glow spread across its mouth, lasting longer than before. Aaron adjusted the system, watching the readouts carefully. The energy from nearby adult dragons in the cities was feeding into the plates through long-range conduits he had secretly tapped. The warmth traveled slowly, safely, like a hidden river. It was a quiet miracle, invisible to anyone outside. The dragons above could not understand it, but they could feel it. And feeling warmth, they grew bolder. One hatchling climbed the side of the wall, testing the new heat. Its wings fluttered strongly for the first time in days. It let out a weak roar, more of a squeak than a fire blast, but it echoed hope through the orphanage. The caretakers gasped. They had not heard such sounds for weeks. They exchanged glances, a mix of fear and wonder. Maybe this human really could do what no one else dared. Aaron checked the system again. The storage unit pulsed gently, releasing warmth in a slow, steady rhythm. He imagined it like a shared heartbeat, each pulse a promise of life. The hatchlings felt it instinctively, clustering in areas where the heat was strongest. The largest hatchling lifted its head, eyes shining. Its wings stretched slightly, showing strength returning. The orphanage began to feel different. The walls no longer groaned as sharply. The floors stopped frosting over. Tiny sparks of fire appeared more often from the hatchlings' mouths, small but steady. The place, once cold and lifeless, had warmth that seemed alive. It was not just heat. It was hope. Aaron moved carefully among the dragons, adjusting plates and coils. He placed sensors to make sure no area overheated. The hatchlings did not fear him now. They sniffed him curiously, brushing against his arms. One brave little dragon climbed his shoulder, sensing the pulse of the warmth in the room. Aaron smiled and whispered, "See? You can be safe now." Outside, the icy wind continued to howl, but inside the orphanage, a quiet energy spread. The warmth system worked steadily, invisible, like magic. The dragons' bodies responded naturally. They were not forced to grow stronger, they were given the chance to grow at their own pace. Every small flicker of flame, every pulse of heat, reminded Aaron why he came. They were alive, fragile, and waiting for someone who could help. By the end of the day, the orphanage felt completely different. Frost was gone from the corners. Hatchlings moved around, exploring, testing their wings. Their weak sparks of fire became small glows of strength. The caretakers, once doubtful, now watched in amazement. The human engineer had done what no one else dared. He created warmth without danger, hope without fear. Aaron looked around, exhausted but satisfied. The system was not perfect, but it worked. The dragons were alive. For the first time in weeks, the orphanage had warmth, not just in the rooms, but in the hearts of the small dragons. He understood the galaxy's disbelief. Humans were not mighty warriors. But humans could think. Humans could build. And sometimes, building something small could save lives far greater than their own strength. And in the quiet, soft hum of the heat system, the orphanage felt alive for the first time in ages. The dragons lifted their heads, breathing small fires, eyes bright and curious. They did not know why, but they could feel life returning. Aaron smiled, knowing that tonight, for the first time in a long time, the orphanage would not be frozen. The warmth would last, slowly, like a heartbeat shared between human and dragon. News of the orphanage's strange warmth spread faster than Aaron expected. Messengers carried word through icy corridors, across trading posts, and to the glittering halls of dragon nobles. They came swiftly, their long wings slicing through the frozen sky. They were proud, ancient dragons, creatures of power who believed dragons survived only through strength and fire. They did not trust humans, and they did not trust any device that could protect the weak. When they landed near the orphanage, their shadows stretched long over the snow. Their scales glimmered like polished metal, and their eyes burned with authority. Their arrival made the caretakers tremble. "They will demand the system be destroyed," one whispered. "They will say we cannot save hatchlings this way. Dragons must fight, even as babies, to survive." Aaron stood quietly, his hands folded in front of him. He had feared this moment. These dragons could destroy everything in an instant. Their claws could tear walls, and their flames could melt steel. He could not match them in strength. But he did not flinch. He had built something stronger than fire, something that gave life without fighting, warmth without pain. The first noble entered. His scales were black like obsidian, jagged along his back, and his eyes glowed a deep gold. He sniffed the air and bellowed, a low, rumbling sound. "What is this place? Why do these hatchlings survive without struggle? Where is the test of strength?" The caretaker bowed, trembling. "My lord, they were weak, cold, and hungry. This human engineer, he built a system that keeps them safe. They do not suffer anymore." The noble's eyes narrowed. "A human? A creature of flesh and weakness dares to touch the lives of dragons?" Aaron stepped forward. "I am not here to fight. I am here to help. These hatchlings were dying. The galaxy does not care. I made a way to keep them alive safely. No fire, no danger, only warmth. That is all." The noble's gaze swept the orphanage. The hatchlings stirred in response, wings lifting slightly, some crawling over each other playfully. A small red hatchling breathed out a gentle spark that hovered in the air, harmless. A group of pale white hatchlings laughed with tiny squeaks as they tumbled over each other near the walls. The noble blinked in surprise. "This is impossible." The caretaker nodded. "It works. It is safe. They are warm. They are eating. They are alive. Never like this before." Aaron gestured toward the heat system. "The warmth comes from the dragons themselves and the environment. It is stored carefully and released slowly, like a heartbeat. It gives them energy, and it does not harm them. The system adapts to each hatchling. No one else could have survived this winter without it." Another noble, silver-scaled and long of body, stepped forward, wings stretching wide. "And you, human, claim to have done this? Alone?" His voice was sharp, skeptical, but curiosity flickered in his eyes. Aaron nodded again. "Yes. I built it carefully. I studied the hatchlings. I worked with them, not against them. That is why it works." The silver noble sniffed the air and stepped closer. Hatchlings looked at him, some crawling onto the floor in front of him, curious. One tiny blue hatchling climbed over his claws and squeaked. He froze, staring down at the small creature. For a long moment, silence hung in the cold air. The noble had expected resistance, fear, chaos, but found only curiosity, trust, and warmth. "You speak of care," he said finally. "Not strength." Aaron smiled faintly. "Strength comes later. First comes life. If the young die, strength cannot grow. If they live, they can become strong in time. But only if they are given a chance." The black noble growled softly, pacing the floor. He sniffed the air repeatedly, watching the hatchlings play, listening to their laughter and soft sparks of fire. He had expected fear, screams, chaos. Instead, he found order, joy, and quiet warmth. The hatchlings moved freely, lifting their heads proudly, showing no weakness, not because of fire or claws, but because they felt safe. The first noble lowered his massive head, eye level with a tiny red hatchling. The hatchling reached out a claw, brushing against the noble's horn. For a moment, the giant dragon froze. No hatchling had dared touch him before. The warmth in the room seemed to pulse, gentle but strong, like a heartbeat shared between dragon and human. The caretakers held their breath. Could the nobles accept this? Could they see the value of life without immediate power? Another small dragon, pale gold, breathed fire into the air. It was not sharp or dangerous. It floated upward like tiny glowing dust. The nobles watched, amazed, as the flames danced harmlessly. Aaron whispered softly, "See? They can use their gifts, but only when they are ready. They are learning without harm." The black noble stepped back, blinking. "A human has taught dragons the meaning of survival, without fire, without battle, without cruelty." His voice was almost a whisper, though it rumbled through the hall. "Yes," said Aaron. "Life first. Strength later. That is how they survive." For a long time, silence filled the room. The hatchlings played, exploring, laughing, breathing gentle fire. Their tiny bodies glowed softly from the warmth that Eren had captured. The nobles watched in awe. They had ruled dragons for centuries, proud and unyielding. They had never imagined that life could be protected by thought, care, and a human hand. Finally, the silver noble lowered his wings and nodded slowly. Perhaps, we were wrong. Perhaps strength is not only in fire and power, but in life itself. The black noble gave a low rumble, almost like a sigh. This human has changed something today. Not only the orphanage, but the way we see the young. Eren looked around, feeling relief wash over him. The nobles were not enemies anymore. They were witnesses. They had seen what the orphanage could be, what warmth could do, and how humans could build life instead of weapons. The hatchlings, unaware of the weight of this moment, continued to play. One rolled across the floor, laughing in tiny squeaks. Another leapt to the shoulder of a caretaker. A group of pale hatchlings crawled together near the warmth plates, eyes bright, tails flicking. Life was returning to the orphanage, stronger than ever. And in the quiet hum of the heat system, Eren understood that the smallest human action, a thought, a plan, a heartbeat, had shifted the galaxy's perception. Dragons could survive without cruelty, strength could grow without battle, and humans could prove that care was as mighty as fire. For the first time, the orphanage was not just a place of survival. It was a place of life, laughter, and hope, recognized by dragons who had once believed that only strength mattered. And that change had begun because one human had dared to imagine something different. Years passed, and the orphanage on the frozen world became famous across the galaxy. Dragons, once feared and untouchable, had learned that life could be protected, nurtured, and grown with care. The small warmth system that Eren Vale had built continued to pulse softly in the walls, like a quiet heartbeat that never stopped. Hatchlings born long after that first winter felt its gentle heat from the moment they hatched. Other species began to hear about the orphanage. Alien diplomats, traders, and explorers told stories of dragons laughing, playing, and growing strong without pain or danger. The tale of a human engineer who had saved the weakest hatchlings without asking for anything in return spread quickly. It amazed many. Across the galaxy, beings who had believed in survival through strength alone began to question their old ways. On distant planets, orphanages and nurseries for all species began to follow Eren's model. Creatures of every kind, winged, scaled, furry, and even hard-shelled, were cared for with warmth, protection, and safety first. Machines and devices were built to support life, not to test it cruelly. The idea was simple, but revolutionary: survival through care, strength through protection, life before power. Eren visited the orphanage often. He walked quietly among the hatchlings, smiling as they climbed over each other, exploring their world freely. Dragons of all sizes would approach him without fear. They remembered him, not as a powerful warrior or a ruler, but as a human who had imagined a better life for them. The smallest ones tugged at his hands, climbing onto his shoulders, brushing against his arms with trust. The old caretakers watched with pride. They had doubted Eren at first. They had feared the human's touch would harm their dragons. But now, they understood that he had done more than keep hatchlings alive. He had changed the way dragons thought. The nobles, once proud and unyielding, now visited regularly, learning how humans built life without fire, without strength, without force. One day, a group of young dragons gathered around Eren, their eyes bright and curious. "Why did you help us?" asked a silver hatchling, wings fluttering nervously. Eren knelt to their level. "Because you were alive. That was reason enough. You did not have to fight, you did not have to prove anything. You only had to live, and I wanted to give you that chance." The hatchlings blinked, trying to understand. Life had been hard for them, but now it felt safe. Some of them breathed small flames that danced harmlessly, a sign of strength returning naturally. The warmth system hummed quietly beneath their claws, a constant reminder of care, patience, and thought. Across the galaxy, dragons remembered Eren's work. In council halls, in trading cities, in the quiet corners of frozen worlds, they spoke of the human who had built warmth for the weak. He did not ask for reward, they said. He did not seek power. He only saw what we could not see, that life is worth protecting, even when it is small and fragile. The galaxy began to change. Species that had once ignored the young or abandoned the sick began to think differently. Alien creatures copied the systems, building warmth and safety into their nurseries. Hatchlings grew stronger, healthier, and wiser. They learned to fly, to breathe fire, to explore worlds, but they did so knowing that someone cared for them first. Strength came naturally, not through suffering, and life was longer, brighter, and safer because of it. Aaron walked one day through the orphanage, watching a group of dragons chase each other across the halls. A small golden hatchling stumbled and fell, but another larger one nudged it gently, helping it up. Care had become a lesson they could teach each other. It spread like fire, but a gentle fire, one that did not burn but gave warmth and courage. The heat system Aaron had built long ago still worked. It was upgraded over time by engineers who had learned from him. It adapted to new generations of dragons, capturing their warmth and returning it to the younger ones. The system was quiet and invisible, yet its effects were everywhere: stronger bodies, braver hearts, and laughter echoing in spaces that had once only known silence. Even the dragon nobles began to visit regularly. They watched young dragons learn and play without fear. They saw the value of care, the power of life preserved. Some of them approached Aaron and bowed, not out of obligation, but respect. They understood that strength alone was not enough. Life needed protection first, and that protection could come from the most unexpected places, like a human engineer on a frozen world. Aaron never asked for reward. He never claimed glory. He worked quietly, moving among the dragons, helping, teaching, observing. The galaxy would remember his name, not because he was mighty, but because he built life. His legacy was not fire or weapons, but warmth, hope, and the knowledge that even the smallest being could survive if someone cared enough to try. Years later, grown dragons returned to the orphanage, carrying their own young. They spoke softly to the hatchlings, teaching them to trust, to explore, to grow. They told stories of the first human who had saved them, who had dared to build warmth when none else would. And the hatchlings listened, eyes wide, breathing sparks of fire that never hurt, only glowed with life. Aaron watched, smiling quietly. He had built more than a device. He had built a future. A future where life mattered more than strength. Where dragons could grow without fear, and where humans could be remembered not for power, but for care. In the quiet hum of the warmth system, the orphanage glowed softly. Dragons of every size played, laughed, and rested in safety. The galaxy had changed, not through war or conquest, but through a simple act of thought, care, and courage. And all of it had started with one human engineer, who looked at weak, shivering hatchlings and decided that life itself was worth everything. And so, the orphanage became a model, a legend, and a reminder. Even in the harshest corners of the galaxy, kindness and ingenuity could create warmth stronger than fire, stronger than claws, and stronger than any challenge that lay ahead. Dragons remembered that human, and they passed the story to every generation, a story of hope, care, and a life saved without asking for reward.